Joining us now, Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton. Welcome back. Good to have you with us.
Thank you, Shannon. Good
so
to be back.
You heard what the vice president said. She says she's repeatedly talked about the civilian toll that's going on with Israel and the strikes in Gaza. We got a statement from NSC spokesperson Sean Savitt yesterday on this, saying we know Hamas has been using schools as locations to gather and operate out of, but we've also have to say repeatedly and consistently that Israel must take measures to minimize civilian harm. So you've got this delicate balance. Get this thing wrapped up, get it over with, but also act with precision to get to the bad guys. How does this thing end, and what do you make of the continued criticism that Prime Minister Netanyahu is doing this and extending this for political reasons?
Well, Shannon, Kamala Harris's comments yesterday, like her policy towards Israel for the last 10 months, just an example of how she's unprepared to be the commander-in-chief. She immediately took at face value Hamas's claims about the number of people killed and what they were doing. Israel has to strike on occasion at places like hospitals and schools because Hamas uses them for command and control or to fire mortars and rockets. There are civilian casualties in Gaza, no doubt, but those are solely the responsibility of Hamas, not Israel. Kamala Harris, like Joe Biden, though, have put more pressure on Israel than they put on Hamas from the very beginning. Just look back a couple of weeks ago when Prime Minister Netanyahu was in town. She refused to preside over the joint session, her only constitutional duty as president of the Senate. She refused to have a meeting in public with them, and she came out and again blamed Israel for the civilian casualties in Gaza, only emboldening Iran and Iranian-backed terrorists. And what did you have 2 days later? Hezbollah, another Iranian-backed terrorist, shot in rockets to Israel and blew up children playing ball at a playground. Kamala Harris is naive, and she's not prepared to be the commander-in-chief.
To be fair, we did see her publicly with the prime minister. We didn't get the content of their meeting, but there are those visuals of them together. But she's trying to balance, it seems like as many in the Democrat Party are, this pull from the progressive side that wants to see this wrapped up and wants to rally on the side of what's happening to the Palestinian people. So how does this end?
But look at what's happened just in the past few days at her rally. She's been interrupted twice by pro-Hamas radicals. The first time, she accused them of helping Donald Trump get elected, not telling them they were demented for supporting terrorists, not telling them that the United States stands with Israel, the victim of the worst slaughter of Jews since the Holocaust, but that they might help Donald Trump get elected. Apparently, though, that was too tough even for her in her campaign, because when she was interrupted next, she literally had a script in front of her. She had a piece of paper that she started reading from in which she sympathized with these pro-Hamas radicals. She said, I hear you, I hear your voice, we need a ceasefire immediately. Rather than saying that we need a ceasefire immediately, she should have been saying, like Joe Biden should have said from the beginning, we need an Israeli victory immediately. And Israel has done a great job, despite the constraints that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden have put on them, despite the fact that they're operating under a significant arms embargo, which Kamala Harris won't even say that she would worsen if she becomes elected president. Again, we cannot have peaceful, stable relations in the Middle East with daylight between the United States and Israel and our Arab partners. That's what President Trump understood. Well, that's why we had peace under President Trump.
You heard what you said there, though, that Israel has every right to defend itself against terrorist factions. Is that not strong enough for you?
Well, she says it all the time, like Joe Biden does, and then she immediately says but. And usually, Shannon, when a politician says but, what matters is what comes after the but, not what came before it. And what comes after the but with Kamala Harris is always implying that Israel is responsible for all the civilian suffering in Gaza, not Hamas, that Israel is the one being provocative when it's waging a defensive war after the October 7th atrocity, and that Israel is the one that should pull in its horns, as opposed to supporting Israel and standing strong against Iran and Iranian-backed terrorists throughout the region.
Okay, I want to make sure we get to a couple of other things. There is this issue of stolen valor. You know what this is like. You've had people question your record, your portrayal of your record in the past. It's now coming up with Governor Walz. The New York Times has a piece saying this. It took precisely no time to figure out that Walz filed the paperwork to run for Congress and submitted his request to retire months before any official order to deploy to Iraq was received, according to National Guardsmen who served with him. He'd been weighing the decision to run for Congress for quite a while. So there's been a lot made about the timeline, the fact that he had announced in February of 2005, I'm thinking about a congressional run. It wasn't until much later that his unit was officially called up. He had put in retirement paperwork. So what do you say to those who push back? Like, this is a non-issue. You're a veteran. This call for respect of other veterans, and you know what it's like to be questioned.
Well, first off, I want to say I respect the service of all veterans, to include Tim Walz, who served for more than 20 years. But now even the campaign has acknowledged he's made past inconsistent statements about his service. I think he should answer questions about those statements. I think he also needs to answer questions about his 35-year-long financial relationship with the Chinese Communist Party, someone who took 30 trips to China and took students with him so they could be exposed to communist propaganda. But more than anything, Shannon, we need to remember that Tim Walz is the vice presidential nominee. Kamala Harris is at the top of the ticket. She's the one that needs to take questions. She refuses to take questions about what direction she would take this country in. She hasn't had a single proposal since she became the presidential nominee. Well, I take that back. Last night she said that she was going to eliminate taxes on tips. So the only proposal she's had since she became a presidential nominee is to steal one of Donald Trump's ideas at a time when her administration said that they would crack down on the taxation of tips. That's why they needed $87 billion for more IRS enforcement. This is the kind of flip-flopping and deception you get from Kamala Harris, who is a dangerous San Francisco liberal who has taken positions in the past like decriminalizing illegal immigration and giving health care to illegal aliens. Her campaign claims that she's changed. She needs to answer questions about why she changed and when she changed.
It's also important that we hear from her, just so there is clarification on these issues, and she's going to have to respond to the attacks from you and other Republicans about that. Real quickly on the China issue, their campaign put out a statement this week saying that throughout his career, Governor Walz has stood up to the Communist Chinese Party, fought for human rights and democracy, and always put American jobs and manufacturing first, and that his back and forth with the educational groups and that kind of thing was to foster some kind of understanding that would make things better for the Chinese people, open these conversations so that the U.S. would be stronger in its position with regard to China as well.
Yeah, it's just not the case. It's spin. Tim Walz has a terrible record on China, just like Kamala Harris does. He's consistently appeased and conciliated the Chinese Communist Party and has repeatedly said we don't need to have an adversarial relationship with China, when China is insistent on having an adversarial relationship with the United States because they want to replace us as the world's dominant superpower. Again, what the Chinese Communist Party did with Tim Walz going back 35 years is a classic example of how they cultivate younger, local, state leaders, teachers, and others to try to get mouthpieces in American politics, and maybe one day hit it big if that person goes on to be, say, a congressman or a governor or a vice presidential nominee.
Okay.
This is why he needs to answer questions about his relationship with China, and why Kamala Harris needs to come out and answer questions, too, about what she would do as president.
Okay, doors always open to both of them. We would love to host that conversation with either. But with all of this playing out and all of your critique of her, the new polls out from New York Times in these key critical swing states show President Trump down in places like Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. Now we have polling with her officially, that ticket firmed up. The Wall Street Journal editorial board is asking the question now if President Trump is, in their words, going to blow another election. They say he doesn't seem to realize he's now in a close race that requires discipline and a consistent message. His struggles are hurting GOP candidates for the House and Senate. This is still Mr. Trump's election to lose, but as we learned in 2020, he's more than capable of doing it. Has there been a shaky pivot to a different ticket?
No, I don't think so, Shannon. We always knew this would be a close election, whoever the Democrats chose to put up against President Trump. But the more the American people learn about Kamala Harris, the less they're going to like her. If you think that your family has struggled under Joe Biden and Kamala Harris for the last 4 years, the worst is yet to come if Kamala Harris gets elected president.
Well, the polls seem that people have an open mind about her. They seem buoyed by the idea that she's on the ticket now.
Once she has to face the American people, answer questions through the media, just like any other presidential candidate would. You know, if you earn the nomination like Donald Trump did in 2016 or Barack Obama did in 2008, you have to do town halls and debates and interviews. She had it gifted to her, and she thinks she can hide out for 100 more days before the election. But eventually, she's going to have to come out and she's going to have to explain what she would do for this country. And once the American people learn that she wants to do things like decriminalize illegal immigration or take away your health insurance on the job,
well,
they're not going to like what they hear.
Those positions may have changed because it seems like, at least from hearing from campaign members and not from her, but from staff, that some of those positions have changed. But again,
all these positions are things she said on tape, in her own voice when she ran for president the last time. Everything else is a Friday night news dump from anonymous campaign aide.
Okay, and we get the economic plan, we're told, this week. So we'll have that to break down by next Sunday. Senator, always good to see you.
Thank you,
Thanks
Shannon.
for coming in.